The night is quiet, yet the sky carries a hidden weight. Above the mountains, clouds drift slowly, like ancient watchers of forgotten time. A soft wind moves through the trees, whispering secrets that mortals cannot hear. Long ago in Greece, voices of prophecy guided kings, wanderers, and dreamers alike. These voices rose from sacred places, where mortals came to seek the will of the gods. Among them stood one oracle unlike any other, the Oracle of Dodona, deep in an oak grove. Here, the rustle of leaves was more than the sound of nature. It was the breath of destiny. The voice of Zeus himself was carried in those whispers, shaping the path of mortal lives. Priests listened with care, and travelers waited in silence, questions heavy in their hearts. The answers came like thunder without sound, truth hidden in the trembling of the trees. But then, one day, the grove grew still, and the oracle fell silent. No whispers, no visions, only the quiet weight of absence remained. From Olympus, Zeus felt this silence as a wound pressing upon the world. Without prophecy, the bond between gods and mortals would begin to fade. And so begins our tale, not of conquest, but of listening, not of battles, but of searching. This is the story of Zeus and the lost oracle. The morning sun rose gently over Epirus, where the sacred grove of Dodona lay hidden among ancient oaks. For centuries, people traveled there, carrying hopes, fears, and heavy questions in their hearts. Some asked about harvests, others about journeys, while many sought answers about love and destiny. The oracle always answered, though its voice was unlike any mortal tongue ever heard. It was softer, deeper, carried in the rustling of oak leaves stirred by invisible winds. Priests leaned close to the trees, eyes shut, hearts open, waiting for whispers from beyond. Every sound was sacred. Every murmur felt like a bridge between heaven and earth. The people believed it was Zeus himself speaking, guiding them with unseen thunder. But one day, the leaves stirred, and no voice followed. Only silence hung in the air. The priests waited patiently, listening as always, but the whispers never returned. The wind carried nothing but emptiness, hollow and strange against the sacred grove. At first, they thought the gods had turned their gaze elsewhere for a short while. Perhaps the oracle needed rest, they said. But days turned into weeks of silence. Travelers still arrived, kneeling with prayers, waiting for guidance, hearts trembling with questions. But mothers received no answers for their children. Sailors no promises of safe seas. Warriors prayed for direction, but the silence gave back nothing but the sound of wind. The priests grew fearful, for the oracle had spoken in riddles before, but never mute. Never in memory had Dodona fallen silent, its voice erased from the world. At night they lit fires, prayed with incense and song, but the grove stayed still. Even birds avoided the branches. Even forest animals stirred uneasy in the shadows. Whispers spread. Had Zeus withdrawn his voice, leaving mortals abandoned in silence? Or had something hidden, unseen, stolen the sacred sound of prophecy away? High above on Olympus, Zeus felt the silence like thunder withheld before a storm. Through Dodona, his will touched the earth. But now, the bond was broken. The absence was not pain, but a hollow echo pressing against the order of things. Prophecy cannot vanish, Zeus knew, but it could be hidden beyond mortal reach. And that mystery unsettled the king of gods more than any storm in the sky. The silence was not only the loss of words, but the loss of trust and light. It was as if a lantern guiding mortals had suddenly gone dark in the night. The stage was set. A silence in the grove, a wound in the balance of worlds. Even the most powerful must search. Even Zeus must listen instead of command. And in that silence, a truth waited, hidden, ready to be found. On Olympus, clouds crowned the sky, and rivers of light flowed across shining marble halls. Zeus sat upon his throne of thunder, yet his heart was restless with an unseen weight. Prayers rose daily like sparks from a fire, but the silence of Dodona pressed upon him. He had always known the oracle's voice, for it was his own breath in the sacred oaks. It was not command, but guidance, softened by wind, translated by the hearts of priests. Mortals sometimes misunderstood, but they always listened, and that listening kept the balance alive. Now, mortals prayed but heard nothing. Priests leaned close but found only emptiness. The bond between gods and mortals felt stretched, frayed, like a rope worn thin by storms. Zeus knew silence was never empty. It was a warning, a sign of something hidden. At first, he wondered if prophecy had only paused, like rivers slowing in their season. But this silence was unnatural, like a curtain drawn across the voice of fate. He rose from his throne, pacing marble halls, firelight reflecting across the polished stone. Hera saw his unrest. "Why do you stir so restlessly, husband?" she asked with calm eyes. "The voice of Dodona is silent," Zeus said. "The leaves give no prophecy, only stillness." Hera frowned. "Perhaps mortals no longer listen. Perhaps their hearts have turned away." But Zeus shook his head. "No. Their prayers rise, yet no answer falls. The voice is hidden." He stepped onto Olympus's balcony, gazing at rivers, mountains, and seas shimmering below. He raised his hand. Thunder rolled faintly, but even that brought him no comfort. Mortals depended on prophecy, not as chains, but as lanterns in the dark of life. Without it, choices would weigh heavier, and despair could grow like shadows in silence. Zeus knew the bond could not be left to crumble, for gods need seekers as well. The silence of Dodona was not only mortal loss, it was a wound in the divine. So Zeus resolved to act, to search, not to wait while the world stood uncertain. If prophecy was hidden, he would find it. If stolen, he would uncover the thief. The air stirred around him, as Olympus itself felt the weight of his resolve. He summoned Athena, Apollo, and Hermes, calling them to share their wisdom and sight. But that gathering belongs to the next part of the tale we will soon tell. For now, remember, even Zeus could not ignore silence, for silence itself has a voice. When prophecy disappears, it leaves behind a question that no god can overlook. And so Zeus, with thunder in his heart, prepared to seek what was lost. The summons of Zeus spread quickly across Olympus, carried by swift winds. One by one, the gods gathered in the great hall, marble pillars glowing in golden light. Clouds curled at the edges of the floor, as if the sky itself was invited to listen. Athena came first, calm and radiant, her armor shining, though no war awaited. Her steps were measured, each one steady, as though wisdom guided even her silence. Apollo followed, bright as dawn, his lyre resting at his side like a faithful companion. He brought warmth with his presence, yet shadows lingered in the depth of his gaze. Hermes arrived last, winged sandals brushing the marble with effortless grace. His eyes sparkled with curiosity, his smile playful, but it faded at Zeus's throne. The king of gods sat heavy with thought, lightning faintly glowing in his hand. "My children," Zeus spoke, his voice like thunder. "The oracle of Dodona is silent. The oaks no longer whisper. The priests hear nothing. The bond grows fragile." Athena's voice rang clear. "Silence has reason. Prophecy cannot vanish, only hidden. The question, Father, is who or what dares to veil it from mortal and divine sight?" Apollo's brow furrowed, his fingers brushing the strings, a faint sound stirring the air. "The voice of Dodona is ancient, woven into time itself. If silent, something is wrong. Perhaps it has turned away. Perhaps it has been taken by a force we do not see." Hermes tilted his head, his quick eyes narrowing as if chasing a thought. "Or maybe it still speaks, Father, but in a tongue mortals forgot how to hear. Words can fade like smoke if listeners no longer understand their meaning." Zeus's gaze swept the hall, his tone firm. "It is hidden, not lost, not forgotten. Something clouds the bond between heaven and earth, and it must be lifted." The air grew still, Olympus itself waiting for the wisdom of its gods. Athena folded her hands. "Then the path is clear. We must uncover the veil. Prophecy may shift its place, waiting to be found anew by those who seek." Apollo's eyes gleamed like fire. "I will search in dreams, songs, and visions. Music carries memory, and dreams are the roads where prophecy leaves its mark." Hermes smiled faintly. yet his words were sharp. "I will listen to mortals, Father. Their stories, prayers, and even gossip may hide truths we overlook." Zeus's voice softened, though it still carried weight. "Good. Each path has purpose. But remember, the oracle's voice is a bond, born from both gods and mortals. To find it, we must listen with the ears of faith, not only the sight of gods. The gods bowed their heads, for they knew prophecy belonged to seekers as much as seers. Without questions, even gods could not give answers. Without belief, silence ruled. The council ended, but its echoes lingered in the vast marble hall. Athena returned to her halls of wisdom, her thoughts already searching the hidden. Apollo walked toward his temple of light, his lyre waiting to sing of dreams. Hermes vanished to the mortal roads, chasing whispers between towns and shrines. And Zeus stood alone upon the balcony of Olympus, the world spread below him. Dodona was still silent, the sacred oaks unmoved, but the search had begun. The silence of Dodona did not remain a secret. From the sacred grove to distant isles, the news spread like ripples on still water. Priests who bent their ears to the oaks now heard only the wind. Pilgrims stood in the grove, waiting for a voice that never came. At first, people thought it was only a pause, a breath in prophecy. But as days turned into weeks, unease began to deepen in their hearts. Dreams no longer guided their sleep. No signs marked their paths, and questions began to replace certainty in the minds of mortals. An old priest knelt by the roots of the great oak one night. His hands touched the bark, strong yet silent, no murmur stirring. He whispered prayers he had spoken since youth, but no voice came. "Where are you?" he asked the sky. "Where is the voice of truth?" Only the rustle of leaves and a bird's cry answered him. Elsewhere, the silence grew clearer in daily life. A farmer looked upward before planting, but no omen appeared. A mother lit a lamp at the shrine, but the flame gave no sign. Merchants delayed journeys. Sailors hesitated. Kings doubted their plans. The silence spread beyond Dodona, touching every part of life. Some believed the gods had turned away from mankind. Others whispered mortals had been careless, driving the voice to sorrow. And some feared the oracle had been stolen, hidden by unseen hands. These whispers rose to Olympus, carried on smoke from prayers. Zeus heard them, Athena heard them, and Hermes felt their doubt. Apollo sat in Delphi, listening to his priests speak of Dodona. They asked him, god of prophecy, why the voice was gone. But even Apollo could not answer, for he too heard nothing. The silence was more than absence, it was a thread unraveling. The bond of faith between heaven and earth was trembling. Zeus walked the gardens of Olympus, his thoughts heavy. He imagined the old priest kneeling at the oaken vane. He thought of the sailor staring at the sea without guidance. He thought of the mother holding her lamp, waiting for light. Prophecy was trust, a bridge between mortal and divine. If the bridge collapsed, the two worlds would drift apart. The silence grew like mist, unseen yet pressing on all hearts. Mortals began to tell stories to explain the loss. Some claimed the oracle had hidden itself, waiting for mankind. Others whispered of a shadow older than the gods themselves. Whether truth or rumor, the mystery only deepened. The voices of Dodona were not paused, they were vanishing. It was as if unseen hands had pulled them far away. Zeus felt urgency burn within him as never before. The search could not wait. This silence was no longer the absence of prophecy. It was the beginning of something hidden, and perhaps dangerous. The world leaned closer, waiting for what would come next. In the villages and cities of Greece, life carried on beneath the weight of silence. Where once there was certainty, now hesitation lingered in every choice. A farmer stood at dawn, seeds in hand, staring at the soil in doubt. Before, he would ask the oracle if the season would be kind. Now he whispered a prayer that faded, unanswered in the breeze. At last, he sowed his seeds, trusting only sun and rain. In Athens, merchants haggled with unease at the crowded market. Would ships return? Would harvests be plentiful? None could say. Without guidance, every bargain felt heavy with unseen risk. Even kings grew restless in the absence of prophecy. One delayed a treaty, unwilling to act without divine voice. Another held back his army, fearing omens no longer spoke. Shadows grew where certainty once stood, and fear followed. Around the hearth, whispers rose with the crackle of fire. Children asked their mothers why the gods no longer spoke. The mothers soothed them, saying the oracle only rested, but in their hearts, they too wondered if it was true. Stories began to spread, filling the void left by silence. Some said jealous spirits had stolen the oracle's voice. Others claimed the gods had grown weary of mortals. Still others imagined the oracle asleep, waiting to return. Travelers carried rumors faster than truth along the roads. A sailor swore a voice called to him upon the sea. A shepherd dreamed of trees whispering words he could not understand. Each tale shifted with retelling, believed by some, doubted by others. Hermes walked unseen among mortals, listening to their voices. He heard not only fear, but longing woven into every word. Mortals still yearned for the divine to dwell in their lives. At night, Hermes carried these whispers back to Olympus. "They do not curse us, Father," he told Zeus with care. "They only wonder if they are still worthy of your voice." Zeus sat in silence, knowing trust, not power, bound both worlds. When trust frayed, thunder could not mend what was broken. Apollo wandered the earth in disguise, seeking signs in music. He listened at shrines, where trembling prayers rose like sparks. Though the oracle was silent, faith still burned in song. Athena spoke through teachers, poets, and philosophers of the land. Her wisdom guided mortals to think, to search for meaning. Even without prophecy, she planted seeds of strength in minds. Yet the silence endured, unmoved by divine or mortal effort. Whispers spread, questions deepened, and doubt grew stronger. A child near Dodona asked his grandmother under the stars, "Why does the great oak no longer speak to us?" She smiled sadly. "Perhaps it waits for someone to listen." Her words lingered in the night, as if the wind carried them. Perhaps the voice had not vanished, only hidden in silence. And in that silence, the fate of gods and mortals would rest. Far from Olympus, in the humble village of Thespiae, a young man named Dorian lived. He was no hero, no king, simply a shepherd who watched the hills. Yet in his heart, he carried questions that weighed heavy. Why had the voice of the oracle fallen silent? Why had the gods turned their faces from the people? Each night, he lay beneath the stars, staring into the vast sky. The constellations glittered like messages just beyond his reach. One night, a dream stirred within his restless sleep. In the dream, he stood at a crossroads, lit by moonlight. Before him stood an old woman cloaked in silver. Her voice was soft, yet it filled the air with strength. "Seek the heart of Delphi," she told him. "There lies the truth, waiting for one who dares to listen." Dorian awoke with the dawn, his heart pounding. He knew the dream was more than a vision of sleep. It was a calling, a thread woven by the unseen. The next morning, he told his family of his choice. They begged him not to go, fearing dangers on the road. But Dorian's resolve was stronger than their fear. With a small pack and his shepherd's staff, he departed. The hills, he knew, soon gave way to winding paths. Villages passed, each filled with whispers of the silence. Everywhere he went, people carried the same unease. Some told him to turn back, that the gods were lost. Others offered bread and blessings for his journey ahead. At night, he sat by campfires, listening to tales. Some spoke of rivers that no longer sang with voices, others of birds whose songs had turned hollow. Dorian felt the weight of each story on his heart. He realized the silence was not only in Delphi, it stretched across the land, touching every soul. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he met a traveler. The man carried scrolls and ink, a philosopher of Athens. They shared a meal beneath an olive tree's shade. "You seek the oracle?" the philosopher asked with a smile. "Yes," Dorian replied. "I must know why it sleeps." The man nodded slowly, as though he expected this. "Perhaps the voice is not gone, but waiting within you." The words lingered in Dorian's mind long after parting. Days turned into weeks as he pressed on toward Delphi. The mountains grew taller, the air thinner with each step. At night, the stars burned brighter, as though guiding him. He dreamed again of the silver-cloaked woman. Her words echoed. Listen not with ears, but with spirit. At last, he reached the foothills of Delphi, trembling with awe. The sacred valley stretched before him, veiled in mist. The temple of Apollo rose in silence, its columns stark. Where once pilgrims thronged, now the stones stood lonely. Dorian's heart pounded as he stepped onto holy ground. The air felt alive, humming with unspoken presence. He knelt, pressing his hands against the earth. Great Apollo, he whispered, I have come to hear. The silence deepened, yet it no longer felt empty. It felt as though something ancient stirred in reply. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of laurel. A chill ran down Dorian's spine, but he did not move. He remembered the woman's words. Listen with spirit. Closing his eyes, he opened himself to the quiet. And in that quiet, the first thread of mystery revealed itself. The temple of Apollo at Delphi stood silent, veiled in mist. Once alive with pilgrims, now its stones echoed only with the wind. Dorian stood at the steps, filled with awe and unease. The silence pressed on him, heavy as a living weight. He entered the temple, where light spilled through broken stone. Dust floated like forgotten prayers in the cold air. The sacred tripod of the Pythia stood empty and still. Brittle laurel leaves lay scattered, waiting for breath. Dorian knelt and whispered a plea into the silence. No voice answered, only the sound of his heartbeat. Then he felt it, a presence stirring in the air. Not sound, but thought, deep and strange. Why do you seek? The silence asked within him. Because people are lost, Dorian answered. Hope is fading. Shadows deepened, stretching along the temple walls. The question came again, heavy and sharp. Do you seek truth or comfort? Truth, Dorian whispered, even if it wounds me. From the ceiling, a single ray of light broke through. It touched the tripod, dust glowing like a halo. Dorian trembled. Was this chance or divine sign? In the light, shadows seemed to take fleeting shape. The scent of laurel filled the air, though none burned. A whisper rose on the wind, faint but clear. Follow the signs. The oracle is not lost. The words faded, leaving silence behind. But within Dorian, something new had awakened. This was not the end, but the beginning. He stepped outside, where the mist thinned into sunlight. Shadows on the mountains pointed like guiding hands. He followed, heart racing, though the path was unclear. Every rustle, every bird song felt like a message. That night, he dreamed again of the silver-cloaked woman. You have listened, she said. Now you must see. Visions poured through him like fire and water. Rivers glowed, carrying words in their streams. Forests bent low, trees whispering secrets to earth. On Olympus, God spoke in silence. And at the center, the oracle bound in shadow, her voice muted, as if chained by unseen force. Dorian awoke, gasping, her cry echoing in him. The signs were scattered, fragments of a greater truth. His journey was only beginning, and the oracle waited. The silence lay over Olympus like a heavy veil. Once loud and full of pride, the gods now stood still, uneasy in the quiet. The oracle had vanished, and the bond between heaven and earth felt frayed. Zeus stood apart, clutching his lightning bolt, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Power flowed through him, yet even thunder could not break the silence. He had ruled with storms, but without the oracle, the future was hidden. Far below, Dorian the shepherd gazed at the mountain's peak. He had never sought the gods, yet fate had brought him into their world. His ears heard no prophecy, yet his heart carried the silence's weight. He remembered nights beneath the stars, when the world hummed like a song. He thought perhaps the oracle's voice was not gone, but had changed. Hera watched Zeus with quiet eyes, seeing his frustration burn within. You fear not knowing, she said gently, her words cutting through the air. Zeus turned, his voice sharp. I do not fear. I bow to no shadow. But even he felt the truth stirring within his chest. Apollo stepped forward, golden in the fading light. The oracle was never ours to command, he said softly. It came to guide, not to serve. The words struck deep, even silencing the fire of Ares. Athena nodded, her voice low. The shepherd sees more than we do. Dorian stepped closer, trembling, yet steady in his purpose. I think the oracle asks us to listen, he said, not to stone, but to the world itself. The gods stared, unaccustomed to wisdom from a mortal's lips. Zeus felt something stir within quiet recognition. Not thunder. The shepherd's words flowed like a river of truth. The river teaches patience. The tree teaches strength. The stars teach wonder. Apollo smiled, hearing truth shine from mortal lips. Athena's eyes gleamed. Wisdom reflected in her calm gaze. Hera's expression softened, though she spoke no more. Zeus unclenched his hand, letting go of the bolt. The sky rumbled not in fury, but in relief. The storm broke apart, sunlight streaming through the clouds. Perhaps silence was never a punishment, but an invitation, an urging for gods and mortals to listen again. Olympus shifted that day, not in stone, but in spirit. The gods remembered they were not masters of fate, but its guardians. And below, mortals lifted their eyes in quiet awe. No thunder, no fire, yet a strength filled their hearts. Dorian returned to his flock, carrying a new vision. He spoke not of prophecy, but of listening. He taught that the divine lived in earth, wind, and stars. On Olympus, Zeus looked down at the world below. For once, he did not command. For once, he simply listened. The oracle remained silent, but its silence was not empty. It was a song eternal, woven into the world itself. The silence over Olympus began to change. It no longer felt heavy or fearful. Instead, it carried the promise of reflection. Yet questions still lingered in the hearts of the gods. Without the oracle's voice, how would fate be known? Who would guide the balance of gods and mortals? And could silence itself ever be enough? The gods gathered in the great marble hall of Olympus. The pillars rose high, gleaming in the pale light. The air shimmered with the weight of their presence. It was time for a council. Zeus stood in the center, strong but thoughtful. No thunder, no fury, only measured calm. The oracle is silent, he said. We must decide how Olympus will move forward. Hera stood beside him, her gaze sharp. Perhaps the silence is not an end, she said. It may be an opening to hear the world. Athena nodded, her eyes bright with wisdom. We sought prophecy as command, she said. But wisdom is not carved in stone. It lives in the choices we make. Apollo leaned on his lyre, golden in the fading light. The oracle never gave us power, he said. It gave us perspective and reflection. Mortals must now learn to see within. A murmur stirred among the gods. Poseidon struck his trident against the floor. The sound echoed like waves across the sea. Without prophecy, balance may fail, he warned. Storms will rise without warning. Athena's voice was calm, yet firm. Balance is not given, it is shaped. We are guardians, not masters of fate. Mortals must carry this weight too. Dionysus smiled, his voice light. Perhaps silence is a gift, he said. Mortals will learn to live in the moment, to drink joy without fearing tomorrow. Ares frowned, his tone like steel. Or they may fall into war unchecked. Without foresight, power can destroy all. The hall grew quiet once more. From the shadows, Hestia spoke softly. Her voice glowed like fire at a hearth. We forget the simplest truth, she said. The oracle was never the fire. It was only a reflection of its flame. The true flame lives in gods and mortals. Her words lingered like embers in the air. Even Ares lowered his gaze at her wisdom. Zeus listened, his heart shifting within. He once thought thunder defined rule. Now he wondered if true rule meant listening. At last, he raised his hand. The silence does not bind us, he said. It frees us to act without fear. We are not slaves to stone words. We are makers of the present. The hall fell into a new stillness, not empty, but full of decision. The Council of Echoes marked a turning point. From that day, Olympus no longer waited. It chose wisdom over prophecy. And in the mortal lands below, Dorian listened. He heard winds, rivers, and his own heart. The gods had found their way. But so too had humanity. Prophecy was not lost. It was returned to all. In the valley below Olympus, life moved with a quiet rhythm. Sheep grazed on the slopes. Rivers carried their songs. And people lived with cautious hope. Yet something had changed. Something silent, yet heavy. The oracle's silence reached even the smallest villages. Some feared it as a curse, while others saw it as freedom. Among them stood Dorian, once only a shepherd. He was no longer just a keeper of flocks. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Eyes turned to him in the marketplace and at the well. People believed he now carried the voice of fate. Every word he spoke felt like prophecy. Every silence carried weight. But Dorian did not claim such power. He remembered the counsel of the gods and their choice. He knew his role was not to speak for fate, but for wisdom. One evening, villagers gathered around a fire. Children leaned forward with wide eyes. Elders folded their hands, heavy with questions. A farmer spoke first. "If the oracle is gone, who will guide our harvests?" A mother asked, trembling. "Without prophecy, how will we protect our children?" An elder raised his voice. "Without fate's voice, how will we know the gods' will?" All eyes turned to Dorian. Firelight painted his face in shadow and glow. Silence filled the night as he stood. At last, he spoke slowly. "The oracle has not abandoned us. It has returned what was always ours, the power to listen." The crowd stirred with unease. Some frowned. Others leaned forward, waiting. When the wind bends the wheat, it speaks of harvest. When the river runs low, it warns of drought. When the stars rise clear, they promise safe journeys. He turned to the children. "And when your heart aches, it shows you what matters most." The people listened, struck by his words. These were not riddles of fate, but truths they already knew. Perhaps the oracle is not a single voice carved in stone. Perhaps it lives in each of us, in the world, in our choices. The fire cracked, sparks scattering into the night. The silence that followed was no longer fearful. It was thoughtful, alive, full of meaning. The elder nodded at last. "Perhaps the gods have not left us. Perhaps they are teaching us to stand." One by one, the villagers agreed in quiet voices. The mother held her child with new strength. The farmer smiled, thinking already of his fields. Dorian felt the weight of their trust upon him, but he also felt the freedom of truth. He was not a prophet. He was only a man, and that was enough. High above, the gods watched in silence. Zeus stood at the edge of Olympus, gazing at the mortal fire. He did not speak. He did not thunder. He only listened. For in the shepherd's words and the villagers' hearts, the lost oracle was found again. Not in one voice, but in many. And so the world moved forward, not by fate alone, but by choice. Beneath the mortal lands, the roots of ancient trees wove with stone. The earth kept its secrets, speaking in a voice older than gods or men. The silence of the oracle stirred something hidden, something vast. Where one sacred voice had fallen quiet, the world itself began to murmur. Mortals who listened found meaning in the whispers of earth and sky. Farmers read signs in soil and patterns in shifting seasons. Shepherds watched the stars, not just as fire, but as guides. Children lay in meadows, feeling the wind brush secrets against their skin. Yet not all felt comfort in these voices. Some trembled at their strangeness. In a forest village, people gathered by firelight. They spoke of dreams, of rivers humming at night, of stones alive beneath their feet. An elder warned, "These are voices, but we are not trained to hear them." Once the oracle told us their meaning, now we are left to wonder. Dorian listened quietly before he spoke. "Perhaps the earth has always spoken. Now we must learn its language." The crowd fell silent, uncertain yet curious. That night, Dorian walked alone into the forest. The moon silvered the leaves, soft light dancing on the ground. He pressed his hand to an oak and felt a slow heartbeat. He whispered, "You are speaking. We never stop to listen." High on Olympus, Gaia stirred, her voice deep as stone. "Children of sky and sea, do you not hear me? My voice was never gone, only buried beneath thunder. Now mortals remember me again." The gods shifted uneasily at her words. Poseidon felt the waves respond, restless and alive. Athena lowered her eyes, thoughtful in the silence. Even Zeus felt the tremor of humility in his chest. For the first time, mortals were not guided only by Olympus. The earth itself had become their teacher. In the village, whispers grew clearer each day. The crackle of flames, the hum of rivers, the rustle of leaves carried meaning. It was not words, but rhythm, a song of life. Children laughed as raindrops told them secrets. Hunters found guidance in the cries of birds. Mothers found comfort in the stillness of dawn. The villagers learned to live by the rhythm of the earth. Balance returned, gentle and steady. Dorian watched, knowing the silence of the oracle was never loss. It was invitation, an opening to a truth older than Olympus. The whispers carried partnership, not command. Mortals were no longer listeners alone, but singers in the song. A new prophecy was born, not from thunder, but from soil and sky. The voice of the world itself had become their guide. Dorian told the people, "The oracle was never lost. It is only changed. The earth speaks, and now we listen." The crowd nodded, their hearts calm and steady. They needed no riddles, no thunder. They had the whispers of the earth. And for the first time, they felt not abandoned, but embraced. On Olympus, the sky was restless. Clouds gathered, though no storm was called. Thunder rolled without command as Zeus stood alone at the edge of the heavens. Below, mortal fires flickered like tiny stars across the dark earth. He should have felt triumph. Yet unease stirred like a storm inside him. For ages, his thunder was law. His voice unchallenged, his will unquestioned. Mortals once turned their eyes upward, awaiting answers from the sky. Now they bent to the soil, to rivers, to the rhythm of the earth. "Have I lost them?" Zeus whispered. But the thunder swallowed his words. Hera approached, her presence calm, her steps quiet as still water. "Your storm stirs without cause," she said gently. "Why does it trouble you?" "They no longer need me," Zeus confessed, his voice heavy. "They hear the soil, the rivers, the stars, not Olympus." Hera's gaze softened. "Is that loss or liberation?" "I am king," Zeus frowned. "Without their faith, what am I?" "A true king guards balance," Hera said. "Even when the crown feels heavy." Zeus turned away, lightning in his eyes. "They no longer fear me. They no longer depend on me." "Fear is fragile," Hera replied. "It breaks easily. Trust endures." Her words cut deep, steady, and true. Athena arrived, her wisdom sharp as a blade of silver. "Father, you see only loss," she said, calm and sure. "But I see harmony. Mortals rise with their own strength. That does not weaken Olympus, it frees it." "Frees us to do what?" Zeus asked, bitterness in his voice. "If they no longer pray, what is our place?" "To listen," Athena answered. "To guard when needed. To guide, not rule." The word echoed within Zeus' guardian, not ruler. That night, Zeus walked alone across Olympus. He gazed down at the earth, hearing laughter and the hum of rivers. For the first time, he listened not for prayers, but for life's song. And the storm within him began to soften. Power was not measured by voices begging for guidance. True power was knowing when to let others grow, when to step back, when to trust the balance of the world. The next day, Zeus gathered the gods of Olympus. "The oracle is not lost," he declared. "It has become many voices. Mortals walk with their own strength, and we must walk with them. Not above, not against, but beside." Some gods looked uncertain. Others nodded, relieved and thoughtful. Even Poseidon grumbled, yet gave a reluctant nod of agreement. Hera's eyes gleamed with quiet pride. Athena's smile was faint but full of knowing. Zeus lifted his hand, and the storm clouds began to part. The sky cleared, vast and bright, stretching without end. Inside, the storm remained, but it no longer raged blindly. It had purpose, strength guided rather than unleashed. For the first time in ages, Zeus felt not ruler, but guardian. And in that role, he found peace. The storm within him had not vanished, but it had found meaning. The night was calm, yet heavy with expectation. Whispers carried across Greece, speaking of the oracle stirring. The world waited, silent, knowing prophecy was about to return. On Olympus, Zeus stood at his throne's edge, gazing downward. He felt prophecy ripple like a storm's first crackle in the sky. The oracle's words, he knew, would bring truth, not comfort. Even Zeus, king of gods, could not escape its reach. Far below, Delphi's temple trembled as if awakening. Its sacred stones hummed, remembering their ancient purpose. The Pythia walked barefoot across the worn floor. Her steps were steady, though her heart raced in her chest. She had dreamt of fire, rivers, and stars that wept. She knew the words would soon flow, not her own. Crowds gathered outside, bearing offerings of laurel and honey. Kings sent envoy. Poet clutched scrolls to capture destiny. Inside, smoke rose from burning bay leaves in thick spirals. The Pythia sat upon the tripod, hands calm on her knees. She closed her eyes, and the ground shifted beneath her. Apollo stirred, filling her with the weight of prophecy. Her lips parted, a sigh escaping like wind through stone. Then words spilled, scattered. A crown of storms, a river divided. Her voice rose, carrying fragments of light and shadow. Priests leaned close, scribbling, straining to capture meaning. Prophecy came rushing, chaotic, yet holding hidden truth. Then her voice changed, stronger, clear as the heavens above. The one who rules the sky must listen to the earth. The storm will break if the root is ignored. The future is not claimed by force, but by balance. Torches flickered, flames bowing, as if in reverence. Zeus felt her words echo deep within his bones. The oracle had returned with challenge, not gentle guidance. Thunder had ruled, but balance now demanded his ear. The Pythia slumped, drained, but lifted a hand once more. Her final whisper carried across the chamber. The choice is near. The crown will not endure alone. Outside, the crowd erupted in cries and questions. Some said it spoke of Zeus himself. Others believed it foretold a mortal hero's rise. A few whispered of rebellion against Thunder's reign. Zeus kept silent, though his heart thundered louder still. The oracle had spoken, and the test had begun. The balance of the world trembled on the edge of change. The days after the oracle's return were heavy with unease. Across Greece, whispers grew into questions, and questions swelled into fear. The prophecy had been spoken, yet its meaning was veiled in mist. Mortals argued in marketplaces, temples, and the courts of kings. Was it a warning to Zeus, or a call for a mortal champion? Some believed it spoke of harmony, not thunder, ruling the world. Others feared it signaled rebellion, a breaking of divine order. On Olympus, tension sharpened, like lightning held in silence. The gods gathered in the great hall, voices clashing like cymbals. Hera spoke first, her gaze steady and cold as marble. Balance is not weakness. If called, we must hear it. Even thunder cannot silence the earth forever, she declared. Poseidon struck his trident, his voice crashing like waves. If balance means chains, I will not kneel to shadows. Athena's calm voice cut through the uproar, clear and sharp. Prophecies do not bind us. They reveal what may come. Ignoring them is folly. Fighting them is worse, she warned. Apollo stood uneasy, though light was his to carry. The words were mine to bear, not mine to choose. I know they are true, though their end is hidden. Zeus sat silent, clouds gathering above his unmoving face. His kin, his rivals, his children, all waited for his decree, yet none came. The king of gods withheld his thunder. Below, mortals felt the weight of silence in the skies. Farmers delayed planting, unsure if storms would nourish or destroy. Sailors waited on harbors, watching horizons with wary eyes. Even poets faltered, their verses full of unanswered questions. In forests, nymphs whispered of rivers running restless and wild. In caves, satyrs heard echoes that did not match their songs. The very earth leaned toward the prophecy, waiting for the tale. At night, Zeus walked alone along Olympus's shining heights. He recalled the oracle's words, "The storm will break if the root is ignored." What root had he overlooked in his reign of thunder? Had his lightning deafened him to whispers of sea and earth? He remembered the age before his rule, when chaos reigned. Back then, lightning was the answer that broke the Titan's grip. But now, the challenge was imbalance, not shadows of chaos. Force alone could not steady the scales of gods and men. To rule by balance, not thunder, felt too near to weakness. The storm gathered, not in skies, but in hearts everywhere. Each awaited the next word, the next sign, the next move. Would Zeus cling to thunder or heed the oracle's call? Clouds rolled heavy above Greece. Rivers swelled with strange rains. The air itself charged, waiting for lightning that never came. The storm had not yet broken, but its shadow stretched long. The oracle had spoken. Zeus remained silent, and the gathering storm drew ever closer. The storm had not yet broken, but its weight pressed upon the world. From Olympus to the smallest village, all eyes turned upward, waiting for Zeus to act. The oracle's return had shaken gods and mortals alike. Now the silence of the king thundered louder than any storm. Zeus stood alone upon the highest peak of Olympus. His robe of clouds shifted restlessly, and lightning flickered in his eyes. Yet no bolt was cast, no thunder unleashed. He felt the burden of ages upon his shoulders. An empire built on thunder, a rule forged in storms. Still, the oracle's words lingered. Asterisk. The crown will not endure alone. Asterisk. He thought of his children, born of sky, wisdom, light, and war. He thought of mortals, fragile yet unyielding, who prayed not only for rain, they prayed for justice, for peace, for hope. Thunder had fed the earth, but it had not always healed it. Could his power truly hold the world steady, forever? A voice stirred behind him. It was Athena, calm as dawn. "Father," she said, "you cannot hold the skies by thunder alone. Even storms pass, even lightning fails. What remains is the balance they leave behind." Zeus turned, his eyes narrowed, yet his heart listened. "And if I yield to balance, will not Olympus crumble? Will mortals rise and gods fall?" he asked. Athena shook her head. "To yield is not to fall, it is to see." The oracle does not speak of defeat, but of harmony, of strength greater than thunder's roar. Soon others appeared. Apollo, glowing with prophecy. Hera, sharp-eyed, speaking not as rival but as partner. Poseidon, trident in hand, yet admitting the seas raged less when rivers were heard. One by one, voices joined, not demanding surrender, but urging him to share the weight. For the first time in ages, Zeus felt the storm within him bend. His lightning, though fierce, softened into light. He gazed at the world, mountains, rivers, and mortals lighting fires against the dark. Perhaps the oracle was right. Perhaps the crown was never meant to endure alone. He raised his hand, and thunder rolled, not in anger, but in gathering. All Olympus trembled. Mortals below felt their breath still. Zeus spoke, his voice carrying across earth and sky. "I have ruled with thunder. I have struck with lightning. Yet even I, king of gods, must heed the truth of prophecy. The storm will not endure without the root. The crown will not endure alone. From this day, the rule of the heavens will not be mine alone to bear." Gasps rose from gods and mortals alike. Never before had Zeus shared his throne. Never before had he spoken of power not as command but as trust. Athena stepped forward, her wisdom to guide. Apollo shone, his light to illuminate. Hera stood tall, her strength tempered by justice. Poseidon lowered his trident. The seas calmed. Together, the gods formed not rebellion, but a council. A harmony of voices, a chorus to steady the balance. And so it was done. The oracle's words foretold renewal, not ruin. The storm had not shattered the world, it had opened it to change. Zeus still held the crown, but no longer as a burden borne alone. He ruled not by thunder alone, but with counsel, earth, and mortal prayer. The world felt it. Fields blossomed, seas grew calmer, skies cleared with gentle rain. Mortals no longer trembled at every crack of lightning. They looked upward, not only with fear, but with hope. The oracle's voice faded, her task complete, yet her words lingered. Asterisk. The storm will break if the root is ignored. The crown will not endure alone. Asterisk. And Zeus, for the first time, smiled. Not as a king who conquered, but as a ruler who had chosen. The storm had gathered. The choice was made. and the world turned toward balance.